Latrice Caldwell was Atlanta royalty, a reality TV star turned high-end socialite, draped in designer labels and scandalous headlines. She had the money, the fame, and a life most people could only dream of. Her life was a whirlwind of luxury, power, and excess. But behind the cameras, beneath the diamonds and the VIP appearances, was a world far less glamorous, a world where family was nothing more than an afterthought. And then, there was her son. Jarrell Caldwell, better known as Rel, grew up in the shadows of his mother's empire, watching from the sidelines as she chased fortune and fame. He wasn't part of the picture-perfect image she crafted for the world. He wasn't draped in Gucci, sipping champagne in rooftop lounges. Instead, he was left behind, scraping by while his mother lived like a queen. And as the years passed, resentment festered. On a warm fateful night, inside her sleek Buckhead condo, everything changed. A brutal crime. A shattered life. A secret that would leave even the most hardened detectives shaken. What happened behind those locked doors? What pushed a son to commit an unthinkable act? Was it desperation, anger, or something much darker? Stay with us as we unravel the shocking murder of Latrice Caldwell, a tale of greed, betrayal, and the deadly cost of neglect. But before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more gripping cases that expose the darkest sides of wealth and power. Latrice Caldwell was a woman who refused to be ignored. Born and raised in Atlanta, she clawed her way into the spotlight, turning a scandalous stint on Bad and Bougie ATL into a golden ticket to fame and fortune. She was the kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and never let anything, or anyone, stand in her way. At 43 years old, she had it all. The luxury penthouse in Buckhead. The closet filled with Chanel, Balenciaga, and Dior. The fleet of luxury cars, always freshly detailed, always ready to be photographed. Every club in Atlanta knew her name, every high-end restaurant had a table waiting for her, and every wealthy man in her orbit was just another accessory to her lavish lifestyle. But Latrice wasn't just a socialite, she was a businesswoman. When reality TV fame faded, she pivoted, building a lucrative career catering to Atlanta's elite in ways she never discussed openly. The whispers followed her everywhere, whispers about the exclusive, high-end escort service she ran, the politicians and athletes who paid top dollar for her discretion. She never confirmed or denied the rumors. She didn't have to. She wore wealth like armor, her life a carefully curated spectacle for social media. But behind the filters, beneath the designer labels, there was something cold, something ruthless. Latrice Caldwell wasn't just about looking rich, she was about staying rich, no matter the cost. And then there was her son. Jarrell Caldwell, better known as Rel, was 22, but he had spent his whole life feeling like an afterthought. While his mother built an empire of glitz and scandal, he was passed around like an unwanted package, left with his grandmother one year, and aunt the next. He watched her on TV, watched her on Instagram, watched her live a life of luxury while he scraped by, struggling to carve out an identity of his own. To the outside world, Latrice was a boss, a queen, the definition of success. But to Rel, she was the woman who had never truly been a mother to him. Resentment had been simmering between them for years. Rel hated the way she talked down to him, the way she dismissed him as a failure, a disappointment. But at the same time, he needed her. He needed the money she sent him every month, a cool $2,000, just enough to survive, just enough to keep him from demanding more. To her, it was hush money. A way to keep him quiet, to keep him out of her way. To him, it was a slap in the face. A reminder that while she flaunted designer bags that cost more than his yearly allowance, he was just another problem she could throw money at. People who knew Latrice would say she was bold, fearless, untouchable. People who knew Rel would say he was lazy, entitled, a waste of potential. But behind closed doors, it was never that simple. Latrice had spent years building her brand, creating the illusion of perfection, of control. But the one thing she never accounted for, the one loose end she never managed to tie up, was the son who had been watching her all along, waiting for the moment when her perfect world would finally come crashing down. Jarrell had spent his whole life feeling like an outsider in his own family. While his mother soaked in the spotlight, he lived in the shadows, watching from a distance as she flaunted a life he was never truly a part of. He was Latrice Caldwell's son, but he never felt like her priority. Not when he was a child, and certainly not now, at 22, scraping by while she draped herself in diamonds and designer labels. At one point, he had tried to do things the right way. He enrolled in college, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if he made something of himself, his mother would finally see him. Finally care. But school never felt like his place. The expectations, the structure, it wasn't for him. And without Latrice there to push him, to guide him, he drifted. It wasn't long before he dropped out. No degree, no plan, no backup. So he did what so many lost young men do, he chased fast money and faster thrills. Late nights in strip clubs, gambling away what little cash he had. Hanging around trap houses, running with guys who never asked questions about his family name, only if he had enough to cover his next bet. The truth was, he didn't. Compared to his mother's extravagant lifestyle, Rel was broke. He wasn't flying to Miami on a whim, wasn't dining in the most exclusive restaurants, wasn't slipping into designer boutiques with the confidence of someone who never had to check a price tag. He lived in a rundown apartment, drove a car that barely started, and relied on the $2,000 a month his mother wired him to keep his head above water. To Latrice, that money was more than enough. To Rel, it was an insult. She had it all, millions in the bank, a condo in Buckhead that could have been his escape from the streets, the kind of money that could have set him up for life. And yet, every time he asked for more, every time he hinted that he needed help, she would shut him down. "You a grown man. Get your own bag." That was her favorite line. As if she had built her empire with hard work and sacrifice. As if she hadn't made her money on scandal and secrets, on men willing to pay for her time. Rel knew the truth. And yet, every month, he waited for that payment to hit his account, hating himself for needing it, hating her even more for making him beg for it. But then, something changed. The deposits got smaller. The excuses got longer. She was busy, she had expenses, she was cutting him off. He needed to stop relying on her. Rel could feel the last thread holding them together starting to snap. It wasn't just about money. It was about everything. Every time she chose a man over him. Every birthday she missed. Every moment he needed a mother and got a stranger instead. He had spent years swallowing that resentment, letting it eat at him from the inside out. But this? This was the final straw. Latrice had made it clear, he was nothing to her. Just another problem she could throw away. But she had no idea who she was pushing away. And she had no idea what he was about to do next. On the night of May 18th started with words. Ugly, venomous words that had been years in the making. The neighbors heard the argument before they even knew who was involved. Screaming, voices rising and falling, cutting through the thin walls of the luxury condo like knives. A man and a woman, locked in a battle that had clearly been brewing for years. Inside, Latrice Caldwell stood in the center of her immaculate Buckhead penthouse, her manicured nails gripping a glass of red wine, her expression twisted in disgust. Across from her, her 22-year-old son, Jarrell, Rel, stood with his fists clenched at his sides, his body tense, his face flushed with anger. She laughed at him. Actually laughed. "You a broke bum," she sneered, shaking her head. "You ain't never gonna be nothing. Just like your daddy." Rel's jaw tightened. His chest heaved. This wasn't new. This was how she always talked to him, like he was less than, like he wasn't even worth her time. "You got all this money," he spat, gesturing around the room, "the expensive furniture, the imported art, the..." Rel was found just 5 miles away from the condo, holed up in a cheap extended-stay motel, the kind of place you go when you don't want to be found. But the thing was, Rel wasn't hiding. When the police knocked on the door, he opened it like it was any other day. No panic in his eyes, no surprise on his face, just a blank, emotionless expression. He wasn't running. He wasn't even acting guilty. In fact, he almost seemed resigned. They arrested him without incident. He didn't resist. No shouting, no denial. He just walked with them, as if it was all somehow inevitable. At the station, the interrogation was cold and clinical. Detective after detective tried to poke holes in his story, try to get him to feel something, anything, but Rel didn't budge. He didn't flinch. Finally, after long moments of silence, he spoke. His voice was flat, as if he were stating a fact. She had it coming, he said, staring blankly at the detective. All that money, all that fame. But she couldn't even take care of her own son. No regret. No sorrow. Just a cold, unfeeling statement of fact. The words hung in the air, as chilling as the blood-stained floor of the condo. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Cameras flashed from every angle as Rel Caldwell's trial for the brutal murder of his mother, Latrice, unfolded before the public's eyes. The case, once a quiet family tragedy, had morphed into a media circus, the kind of spectacle that had captivated a nation obsessed with wealth, drama, and scandal. The courtroom was a reflection of the larger world outside, where every detail of Latrice's life had been dissected for public consumption. Now, it was Rel's turn to face the judgment of not only the legal system but of a society eager to decide his fate. The prosecution wasted no time in painting a damning portrait of Rel. To them, he was nothing more than a lazy, entitled son who had killed his mother out of pure greed and frustration. They had evidence, texts from Rel to his mother, messages full of resentment, demands for more money, a history of failed attempts to get his life together. Financial records showed the $2,000 monthly allowance Latrice had been sending him, the same amount that had been cut off just days before the murder. It wasn't just about money, it was about a toxic relationship that had been strained to its breaking point. Witnesses testified about Rel's behavior over the years. Family members spoke of a young man who had been neglected, left to fend for himself while Latrice lived her life of luxury. She had never been a real mother to him, they said. She was too busy with men, too busy chasing fame, to be there for her son. To them, this was the story of a son who had been abandoned by the woman who should have cared for him, a son who had been left to watch his mother's lavish life from the outside, always on the outside, always second to her own desires, but the defense had a different story to tell. They argued that Rel wasn't a cold-blooded killer, he was a victim of years of emotional neglect and verbal abuse. His mother had failed him. The defense painted a picture of a broken young man, a product of a toxic environment, with no real parental guidance, no love, and certainly no support from the one person who should have been his foundation, his mother. They pointed to Latrice's lifestyle, her fixation on wealth and status, as the driving force that had driven Rel to the edge. He had been nothing more than an afterthought to her, a pawn in her world of luxury and excess. The media ate it up. Headlines screamed, "The reality TV murder, a son's revenge," and "From riches to ruin." The public couldn't get enough of the tragedy. Some saw Rel as a victim, just another troubled young man who had been failed by the system, by his mother, by a society that values wealth over family. They empathized with him, believing that he had been pushed too far by years of emotional neglect. Others, however, were less sympathetic. To them, Rel was nothing more than a spoiled, bitter son who, when the money stopped flowing, resorted to violence. His mother had given him everything he needed, money, status, opportunities, and yet, he had squandered it all. The trial was a tug-of-war between these two polarizing views, each side trying to convince the jury of their truth. As the days dragged on, the tension in the courtroom became palpable. Everyone wanted to know the truth, but the truth was messy, complex, and tangled in years of resentment, neglect, and rage. There was no clean answer, no easy explanation for what had transpired in that Buckhead condo. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict. Rel Caldwell was found guilty of first-degree murder. The room was silent, the weight of the verdict settling over everyone like a thick fog. Rel's face was blank, almost emotionless, as the decision was read. There was no relief, no sense of justice, just a cold acceptance of what was to come. When the judge pronounced the sentence, there was no remorse in Rel's eyes. "You have shown no regard for human life," the judge said, disgusted by the brutality of the crime. "You have shown no remorse for the savage nature of your actions. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, with no chance of parole." The sentence was harsh, but the brutality of the crime had left no room for leniency. The judge had seen enough. There would be no second chances for Rel Caldwell. His mother was gone, and no amount of time behind bars would ever bring her back. Rel had taken the life of the woman who had given him life, a life built on wealth, luxury, and a false sense of entitlement, but in the end, it wasn't enough to save him. As he was led out of the courtroom, shackled and expressionless, the final words Rel uttered were chilling in their simplicity: "She owed me that money." The statement hung in the air, a final, bitter reminder of a relationship built on resentment, neglect, and an unquenchable thirst for what he believed was his by right. The media continued to pore over the case for weeks, dissecting every detail of Rel and Latrice's toxic relationship. But for Rel, there was no more spotlight, no more money. Only a lifetime in a cell, alone with the consequences of his actions. And Latrice, the woman who had everything, would never get the chance to enjoy her wealth or fame again. She was gone, and the world moved on, leaving behind only the remnants of a tragic family saga. This wasn't just a crime of greed, it was a tragedy born from years of resentment, emotional neglect, and a twisted pursuit of wealth over everything else. Latrice Caldwell spent her life building an empire of luxury and excess, a life where money, fame, and status were the ultimate goals. But in the end, it wasn't the world of high-end cars, designer clothes, and exclusive parties that would be her undoing. It was the very people she had discarded in her chase for more, most of all, her own son. Rel, the child she neglected, the one she saw as little more than an accessory to her life of indulgence, turned on her in a moment of explosive rage. The money, the fame, the fortune, it was all meaningless when the very person she had used for her image was the one who took everything from her. And in the end, Latrice Caldwell lost it all. Her life. Her wealth. Her legacy. And the son who should have been her greatest responsibility. But what about Rel? Was he simply a product of years of emotional abuse and neglect, someone who had been conditioned by a mother who never truly loved him? Or was he a man who used those circumstances as an excuse for his own choices, for his violent, unforgivable actions? Could this tragedy have been avoided if Latrice had been a different kind of mother, one who valued her son as much as her fame? Or was there something darker inside Rel all along, something that couldn't have been prevented no matter what Latrice did? What do you think? Was Rel's fate sealed by his upbringing, or did he make a conscious choice to end his mother's life? Could things have turned out differently for both of them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe for more cases that expose the darkest sides of fame, fortune, and family betrayal.